live stream episode of For the People podcast, and I am, of course, your humble host, Nico House. Today, I have for you a very special guest, and we're going to solve this once and for all. Pronounce your name slowly for the world, because when you do your streams, you say it really fast, and you forget that the majority of your audience is American. They have no idea what the hell you're saying. So,
yes.
pronounce it for the world.
First of all, my name is Greek. And the Greek name of my name is George. And then the translation of my name is Kevork in Armenian, which means George, Georg, Kevork in Armenian. So my name is Kevork.
Okay, first of all, the Greeks and the Armenians need to have a conversation about that, because ain't no way in hell that translates to Kevork. Like with Spanish and English, it's like, oh, what's his name? John or Jose. Okay, I can work with that. What's it? Nico, Nicolas, Peter, Pedro,
Just
George,
call me
Kev.
Just call me Kev.
Because basically everybody I know called you Syrian Analysis. They just like, yeah, man, that's his name. First name, last name, Syrian.
This is so true. The other day I was speaking to a friend on a video call in Syria, in Damascus, and he was talking with me in the street, and he had some friends walking with him, and they were like, "Is this not Syriana Analysis?" It's like, I have a name, like, what is Syriana Analysis?
I got a couple people like that, bro. I got a couple people like that where their name is like, either they don't say their name a lot and they don't realize it. They just assume everybody knows their name, or like their shows people like I have a friend, Adrian. His name is Adrian, but everybody just calls him Case because it's like his account is Case Study QB. So everybody's like, yeah, man, what's up, Case? I'm like, your name ain't Case? Why the hell everybody call you? He's like, oh, it's because nobody really knows my name. I guess I never really talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So we got an exciting show for you guys today. A lot has obviously happened last week. I made the stream earlier this week, but, new baby daddy problems. Boy, daddy work has been crazy lately. This man he's just been fighting with sleep lately. I don't know why, last 2 or 3 days. And he is not, like, I guess because I gave so much attention to my oldest for his party this weekend, his birthday party. Now he's like, all right, I want all my attention. So he hasn't really been letting me do anything. But we're here. And so to give you the best analysis of not only Iran, not only Israel, but really the Middle East, I feel like you give some of the best analysis. I wanted to have you on so that you can kind of give your breakdown of what you feel is about to happen. Because we are, for those of you who don't know, the U.S. had asked, and the rest of the West asked Israel to show some restraint. Israel basically said, fuck y'all, we're going to do what we want to, which is crazy. Because, like, if you were spending my goddamn money, you're going to do what I tell you to do. But this is Israel, right? So, and then Iran said that they weren't going to actually retaliate unless Israel retaliates.
Yes.
And it looks like Israel's going to retaliate. So what do you think is coming next, man?
So to predict what's probably going to happen in the future, I would like to put this in a proper context. So what happened in Iran is very important in 1979, what is called the Islamic Revolution. The Islamic Revolution was a reaction to a coup that the CIA and the MI6 and also the Mossad have hands in it in 1953 to remove Mossadegh in Iran. Mossadegh was their leader in 1953 who nationalized the energy sector. So the Americans and the Brits, especially the Brits, were very pissed off by nationalizing the Iranian energy sector. Likewise, when they were pissed off when Jamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal in Egypt. And in both cases, if you remember, in Egypt, they bombed Egypt. And in Iran, they orchestrated a coup to remove Mossadegh from power. So this has led into the installment or the bringing of the Shah dictatorship and to power. And yes, it was a secular regime, but it was imposed from outside, and also the energy sector has become again in the hands of the foreign powers. So the people were increasingly, let's say, frustrated by the economic policies of the new regime in Iran, especially the Shah government. And this has led into, let's say, more conservative and more Islamic sentiments in the country, which eventually led into the revolution, the Islamic revolution led by Khomeini. Now, when the revolution happened...
I don't want to interrupt, but I do got to say that's a very interesting point that you made, because a lot of people aren't really aware that the Shah government was more secular, and that what it sounds like you're saying is that right now the Islamic government that is currently in charge of Iran was actually something that was chosen by the people for the most part,
Yes.
because
Yes.
almost as an extreme reaction to the Shah,
Yes.
which was imposed by outside forces. Go ahead.
It was an organic revolution. It wasn't supported by outside forces. The people have when there is a revolution in a country, we have to check what is called the revolutionary conditions in the country, and the people were ready to adopt this the Khomeini model in the country because they wanted to preserve their national first sovereignty, their natural resources, and to become independent again and sovereign again. Because under Shah they were a playground for the Americans, the Brits, and the Israelis, and there was an ally with these powers, right? So when Al Khomeini came to power, one of the pillars of the revolution was that he's going to work to undermine the American-Israeli hegemony in the region, and he raised this slogan since then. And he also initiated what is called Al-Quds Day, or in English is the Jerusalem Day. So this was unprecedented in the region, and Iranian government is picking a day that is dedicated for Al-Quds. And also part of the budget of Iran, it goes also to the resistance groups, the armed resistance groups in Palestine and in Lebanon, whatever the nature and the ideology of these groups are. They don't care whether they are left wings, whether they are communists, whether they're socialists, whether they are Islamists. They supported these resistance groups there. So this is very important to understand what's happening today, because the main consideration that the Americans always raise are that, the Iranians are destabilizing the region, they are supporting terrorism, etc., etc. But the definition of terrorism for the United States is any act of violence, armed resistance against Israel or the United States or any occupation, right? So,
as long as you're brown,
yeah,
if you're white,
yeah.
then you're a militia.
I mean, it's a very, in my opinion, what the Iranians did was they adopted what is called the strategic patience, because the Iranians were not strong enough to match the Americans and the Israelis in the region. And if we remember, the Americans pushed Saddam Hussein against Iran, and they fought against each other for 8 years. So Iran was devastated, and after that they were under sanctions. So what they adopted this strategic patience. They relied on their own resources, their technology, and their own economy to overcome this and circumvent the sanctions regime imposed on them, right? So people were, in the past decade and two, they were always wondering, why is Iran not retaliating? Why is Iran not responding? Why all these questions? Because Iran didn't have the capacity to respond and impose a deterrence against Israel. Because if Iran responded 10 years ago or 20 years ago against Israel, Israel would have retaliated 10 times more against Iran.
Because
Against
they have
Iran.
resources in the
Yes.
network. Because
Yes.
it wouldn't just be Israel.
Yes, but now in 2024, Iran has strong alliances in the region. Iran has spread its influence in the region. For example, has a strong presence in Iraq, has a strong presence in Syria, has a strong presence in Yemen, has a strong presence in Palestine, and a strong presence in Lebanon. And also, in addition to that, they have struck a diplomatic and security deal with Saudi Arabia, with the mediation of the Chinese. So basically, the Iranians neutralized the Saudi threat against Yemen, which was an ongoing war. And at the same time, they have now strong non-state and state actors in the region who are working together in joint military operation rooms against the adversaries, right? And this started mainly after the regime change war in Syria, which the Americans call it a revolution, which is a CIA operation in Syria, right? So the Iranians came to Syria and they said, we want to help you to overcome this challenge. So they created joint military operations room in Syria, and this included Hezbollah, also included Syria, and included some of the Iraqi non-state actors. So this has led into more organic, let's say, alliances between these countries, because they fought together against ISIS, they fought together against Nusra, they fought together against the American-backed these terror groups in the region.
Which is funny, because you always hear the West attempt to they try to put Hezbollah and ISIS in the same basket, as if they have the same goals. But it's not true, basically.
Hezbollah actually fought against ISIS. Hezbollah protected the Christian villages, the Yazidi villages, the Kurdish villages, the minorities in Syria. They have paid hundreds of their fighters defending my presence in Syria and defending the presence of my parents and my grandparents and the
Wow.
future. The Hezbollah fighters came to Syria and they actually were game changers against these CIA-backed groups, and that is why they are called terrorist group. I mean, Hezbollah is completely different from the ISIS. Hezbollah actually the biggest ally of Hezbollah in Lebanon is a Christian movement. They together.
Wow, I did not know that.
They together. It's called the Free Patriotic Movement. They together formed the government in the last government. Right. So the Christians in Lebanon, the Christians in Syria, for example, they know that were it not for Hezbollah, ISIS would have invaded Lebanon and slaughtered the Christians. And they know
that's the total opposite of what we hear. We hear that Hezbollah hates Christians and they're eliminating them from the region. And
that's an Israeli talking point. And I've seen this after Tucker Carlson's interview with the Christian pastor from Bethlehem, and how they were claiming that the Christians are under threat from Hezbollah and they're going to eliminate them. The truth of the matter is, in Lebanon, we have different Christian political parties, and two of them, and there are, I think, 3 or 4, but 2 of these 4 who are not a majority, they are the minority, probably 10 to 15%. They are very. I don't use these terms to smear the people, but they are fascists. They are self-proclaimed fascists, and they have collaborated with the Israelis when Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, and they the president that came to power in Lebanon in the 80s with the endorsement of the Israelis brought him to power. He was the friend of Ariel Sharon. He is the father of the current leader of one of the Christian parties. And he got assassinated by the Syrian socialist nationalist movement back then. So there is a strong argument that this party is a collaborator with the Israelis, right? And they, up until this moment, if you see their coverage of how they see the war in Gaza, they wish Israel wins this war. So Hezbollah's
hold up, they wish Israel wins. Isn't Israel simultaneously bombing Lebanon like right now?
Yes, but these people are, to be honest, pro-Israel, pro-American, and they believe that they are part of the Western world, and they are the rest of the people are vulgar, and they are the cool ones, and they are the civilized ones. They are influenced by more the West than the rest. I'm a Christian myself. I lived in Lebanon. I lived among these people. They are completely different mentality. Some of them are from my family, and they belong to this line. And these people, when I sit with them, I feel like, who am I talking to? Is this guy an Israeli or is this guy Lebanese, you know? So they wish for Hezbollah to lose against Israel, and they're collaborating with Israel. So the problem of Hezbollah with these groups, these 2 Christian groups in Lebanon, is not religious, it's political, right? So now we put this Iranian rise in the region into context. We know that Iran has a strong alliances in the region, and they can inflict pain on the United States and Israel. So what happened after the October 7? Iran, the second day, they moved to, as we said, to work. And what they did basically is Hezbollah started retaliating against Israel in the northern part, on the northern settlements, in order to decrease the pressure on the Gaza Strip. So 1/3 of the Air Force and half the tanks and many of the soldiers actually and the reservists are now busy in the north, out of fear that Hezbollah could intervene and wage a ground offensive, and this decreases the pressure on Gaza. Secondly, the Yemenis in the Red Sea, they have imposed a blockade on the Israeli cargo ships, and then the Brits and the American cargo ships. And the Iranians, recently also, they have taken over a cargo ship, partly is belonging to an Israeli businessman. So what the Iranians are doing at the moment, they are strangling the trade routes of Israel, and at the same time posing a security situation in northern settlements of Israel, where hundreds of thousands of people fled these settlements, and they're unable to come back because of the presence of Hezbollah. So the Iranians have actually contributed in a tangible contribution to this conflict after the October 7 events. And in Syria, where the coordination happens, most of the time Syria is the coordination hub. It's the geography where the weapons also go to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah delivers them to Hamas and Jihad and other groups in the Gaza Strip. So the Israelis thought that the Iranians are still in this position of strategic patience. That because Iran, if you see in the past 2 decades, they are scoring small points against the Israeli-American axis in the region without going into direct war against them. And compared to
it kind of reminds me of Russia a little bit back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, compared to 2003, when the invasion of Iraq happened, with 2024, Iran's influence has grown massively in the region, right? So they don't need to go into direct conflict against the United States or against Israel and trigger a regional war, which is going to be like they're shooting themselves in the leg. So they are already winning, and they are striking deals with the Russians, with the Chinese, and strategic partnerships with them. So all in all, everything is going in favor of Iran and not in favor of Israel. So in my opinion, the Israelis miscalculated here. They thought that the Iranians will swallow it, just like the previous ones, they swallowed it. And this time the Iranians said the strategic patience is over. I'm going to retaliate against Israel. But this was very calculated retaliation. They have spoken first to the Russians, to the Chinese, so that they have their backing in the UN Security Council. They have called the Iraqis, they have called the Syrians, they have called the Saudis, they have called the everyone.
Calling up the favors, man. Calling up all the favors. Like, hey, man, remember we was helping y'all out?
And they told everyone that we are not targeting you. We are not going to pose any security threat against you. Our retaliation is going to be very calculated against military installations in Israel to restore the deterrence against Israel. And remember, when the attack started to happen, they have declared it in the media. They said, now we are firing drones and then coming Scud missiles, their cruise missiles, etc., etc. They told everyone what they're going to do, because the intention was not to cause severe damage to Israel, but to restore deterrence. And despite that, the Israelis have relied on American weapons, on Jordanian weapons, on British weapons, and their own Iron Dome. And despite that, the Iranian missiles, which were intended to hit some of the air bases in Israel, have hit their targets. This was the message sent by Iran.
That story hasn't been getting told. Well, we've been seeing the mainstream media is the Iron Dome saved Israel because they had a 90% success rate, which I don't necessarily believe that either. I don't believe 90% success rate. That's a very specific number. I just don't believe.
They said 99%, and it reminded me of the former information minister of Saddam Hussein in 2003. And despite my sympathy with Iraq back then, but they had a minister of information, and he used to go to the streets and tell the TV channels that the Americans are committing suicide on the borders of Iraq, and we're killing them like rats, and they are not moving 1 meter inside Iraq. And the Americans were already in Baghdad. This is the same level of stupid propaganda that Israel have adopted. 99%. What the fuck? We saw with our own eyes how the missiles were falling on the air bases. So
exactly,
what the Iranians did, basically, they have sent hundreds of drones to create an aerial situation that all the radars are now busy which one to detect. And then the ones that they wanted to hit, they hit these military bases. And this was the message to the Israelis, that we can hit you with our old weapons. Those were the old missiles. So we have.
Wow, I did not realize that either. Good God.
Yeah. So
Kevork, I got a question for you. So here's my theory. I've been touting this theory a lot because so from my personal military experience, based off what we've seen in the past, I have a theory that part of the reason we sent Iraq to mess with Iran back in the day rather than going against Iran ourselves, part of the reason that Trump didn't retaliate after Iran retaliated once we assassinated Soleimani, is that the United States and the West, basically because of the relations with Iran, they actually have zero idea, like truly, what Iran's capabilities actually are, right? Because I mean, you can look at Iran on the map. I don't believe that that's actually the size of Iran. I believe that Iran is actually bigger. It's kind of like the idea of Texas, right? Even to scale, Texas in the United States is actually much bigger. Like apparently, you can fit like literally everybody in the world in a 1,200-foot apartment in Texas. That's how big it is. And Iran is obviously much bigger than that. So
Yeah.
there's that. There's they think they understand their weapons capabilities, but like you said, those are the old missiles. And look what they were able to do with a couple of drones and old missiles. So we don't even know exactly what they're capable of in the same way that we didn't know until Putin was like, yeah, we don't really care. We can tell y'all now. Yeah, we have hypersonic missiles. Whatever defenses the U.S. thinks they have, we can actually get past it. We just really didn't tell y'all.
Yeah.
So
There are a few indications here, my friend. One, whatever Hezbollah has in its hands now, and they're showing it to the press, those are at least 10 years old weapons that were produced by Iran. Anything that Hezbollah and the Houthis have in their hands, Iran has 10 years ahead developed weapons. This is the minimum. And the Iranians are very generous, let's say, with supplying weapons to Hezbollah and to the Yemenis in this regard. And they're giving them good quality weapons. But whatever Iran has is way more sophisticated than the ones that the Hezbollah and the Yemenis have in their hands.
yeah.
Now, the Americans can simply, and the Israelis can simply bomb the hell out of Iran. They can bomb the government buildings. They can assassinate their leaders. They can probably destroy their military installations, this and that. However, this is not how wars are fought. People think this is a video game. No, they have to see the first retaliation coming from Iran after the first bomb falling on Iran. And this is going to be on every single energy refinery, every single fuel refinery in the region, in the Gulf countries, because these countries will be used as a starting point of an attack. Or where will the American fighter jets will fly? It's going to be either from Bahrain, or going to be either from Kuwait, or from Qatar, or from Saudi Arabia, right? So every single oil refinery in this country will be bombed. And this will lead into huge spike of energy prices in the world. And this is going to
it's already starting, really.
Yeah, and this is going to create a huge economic crisis global, and it's going to be the downfall of the global economy. They will going to block the straits in the Gulf. It's the Arab Strait, it's the Red Sea, it's Mediterranean from Syria and Hezbollah. So if the Americans can sustain that, let them do, but they know they cannot. I mean, the Americans cannot destroy global economy by going into war against the Iranians. So the Iranians actually are holding the economy hostage in their hands. This is their deterrent card against the Americans. If you destroy us, we will going to destroy the economy, and then you will suffer immensely, and this is going to impact you directly.
And Iran's fine; they'll be okay, right? Because of their relations that they have with Russia, with the region in general, with themselves. Like obviously, like they're going to struggle a little bit, but like you're already trying to sanction them to death. So
yes,
how much more could it hurt?
This scenario could happen only if there is an existential threat against Iran. And that is why what I say is the Americans are not like, there are so many psychopaths in the United States, but they care about their pockets as well. So here is where the situation comes. It's a self-inflicted damage for them if they attack Iran. That is one of the reasons why they don't attack Iran. When Iran gunned down one of the American drones under Trump, and Trump was like bulldogging and talking shit all like he does all the time. I'm going to do this and that. But then he backed off because the Pentagon general told him, look, we can bomb them. We can take out some of the air defense systems. We can bomb government installations. Just put anything on the map. We can do that. But think about the next day. And the next day, what is going to happen is no American cargo ship will be able to every cargo ship will be sink in the region, and our energy resources and our partners will be hit. And therefore, this is something that is a double-edged sword. We are going to hurt ourselves. So he backed off and he said, probably he saw Jesus in his dreams, and then he all of a sudden woke up that he wants to be peaceful and he doesn't want to do this, right? So in my opinion now, this is where the Americans stand. This is why they are asking Netanyahu not to bomb Iran again, because the retaliation this time is not going to be like the one that we saw this time. This time was just they send a message. This is what we're capable of doing it. And this is something I think I watched Scott Ritter was saying on the Redacted. It's the message. The message was sent from Iran that I have the capacity to do this. So are you ready for that? And the second thing that is very, very important that the Iranians have achieved in these strikes, they basically discovered every single Israeli-American air defense systems in the region, whether it is in Jordan or it is in Israel, and they have mapped everything now because Israel and the United States used everything against these rockets and against these missiles and against these drones. Nothing left in Israel. Every single air defense system was used against these weapons.
Against this most recent attack?
Bitte? What?
In this most recent attack, they used everything they could to defend themselves?
Everything was used. Everything was used. The American weapons, the Israeli weapons, the Jordanians intervened, the Brits came from Cyprus. So they have now a complete understanding of the Israeli-American defense systems in the region, and they mapped them. So what they can do basically next time, they can reverse engineer this, and they can first, before sending any drones there, they can strike the air defenses, which they know now the locations, everything. So the Americans basically they fall into the trap in this. Now the Americans have to change everything in the region, and if they are going to allow Netanyahu to bomb Iran, they are not going to have time to change the architecture of these defense systems in the region. So basically, Iran, why they sent these hundreds of drones? Because they wanted them to be gunned down. They want to see where are the air defenses in Jordan and in Israel. So they have. This was an intelligence success for Iran. And to be honest with you, I just want to mention one thing. There are some of these so-called analysts on X and these commentators, talking heads. They were mocking Iran. And they call themselves pro-Palestine people, but they hate Iran so much more than Israel. And there are multiple reasons for that. Those are all what they call the Muslim Brotherhood people in London. They were on the show of Piers Morgan multiple times talking about Palestine. And what happened is these people cannot fathom the fact that a different Islamic school of thought, Shiites, and the Persians, different ethnicity, are going to be dominant in the region. And they have this always complexity towards Iran. They don't say the same thing about Erdogan. When Erdogan expands to Syria, they don't say the same thing. But when Iranians' influence is expanding in the region, they get very frustrated. And they say if Palestine is going to be liberated by forces supported by Iran, then we don't want it, right? And
well,
these people,
isn't Hamas in some way supported by Iran?
Of course. I mean, who sends the weapons to Hamas?
So they're complaining about Hamas too? I'm confused.
yeah. These people are very useful idiots. And during the Syrian war, they invested all their energy against Assad, and they lied to the people, and they said that the liberation of Palestine passes through removing Assad from power. Okay, the opposition forces, they occupied southern Syria, which is on the borders with Israel. And why didn't they fight against Israel? What they did, basically, they went and took medical treatment in the hospitals of Israel, and Netanyahu came and shook hands with them and then gave them cash money and sent them back to Syria. These people are complete idiots, in my opinion. Sorry to say, and they are basically serving American interests in the region only out of hatred toward the Persians, the Iranians, and because they are very sectarian. And those people are in my opinion, the fifth column in the ranks of the pro-Palestine people, because the rhetoric, their rhetoric and literature is they attack the Jewish people. They don't draw distinction between the Jewish people and the Zionist people. So they bring this attention to the pro-Palestine alliance.
That's probably why they're called on, so that the entire movement can then be labeled as an anti-Semitic movement.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And they also invest so much energy against Iran, against Syria, against Hezbollah. And I've seen this the other day on a podcast participated by a professor who was kicked out of his job, David Miller, actually. So David Miller was on a podcast, and he was asked, so what do you say to the people who lost the war against Assad in Syria? And he said, just get over it. And these people cannot get over it. They think that what happened in Syria was a genuine revolution, and they wanted to install what they call a Sunni government in Syria because, as I say, their hatred is sectarian. So those are the fifth columns in the pro-Palestine community, and I think they're very dangerous because what they do basically, they try to destroy the pillars of the resistance in Palestine. Basically, they want to destroy Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, these only three players, and of course the Yemenis as well, who give tangible support to the Palestinians. So if we remove these players from the scene, what is going to happen next? That the Palestinians will be deprived from any sort of support, tangible support, and then the Palestinians say, okay, I cannot resist anymore, then we have to strike a deal with the Israelis, and the Israelis will say, no, Habibi, why would I strike a deal with you now?
You have no leverage.
I can just kick you out of Palestine completely. So,
and then those same people who were denouncing Yemen and Iran, they'd be like, oh my God, we got to free Palestine. Like, bro, no, all their allies, you just shunned, you just complained about and said that they aren't, like they're evil. That happens a lot though, right? We see people who can understand like why we have to support Palestine, and even in this particular case, why it's necessary to understand why Iran, one, should be able to defend itself. Two, their adversarial nature with Israel is probably the only thing that's keeping Israel from going berserk, like more than they are right now. And then like they'll be like, yeah, but Russia's evil. They invaded Ukraine. They want to take over the world. It's like, well, hold up, what? Like, no, you don't understand. Like, Russians were getting killed, like in mass, and no one was doing anything about it. And there's treaties and shit that you got to follow. Like it's part of international law. But they don't care. They're just. It's weird that you have this disillusionment. Like, oh yeah, you can understand this issue, but this issue over here, you can't understand why. And it's usually, like you said, sectarian, religious based. Nationality based, et cetera, et cetera.
Many people do not understand these geopolitical conflicts. For example, what happened in Ukraine is a strategic defeat for NATO. And the strategic defeat for NATO, it decreases the dominance of the United States around the world. And when the dominance of the United States decreases around the world, it also affects negatively on Israel. It's like Israel is basically, it's a military base in the Middle East and an aircraft carrier. This is not me saying it. It's RFK, Bobby. He's saying that Israel is our aircraft carrier in the region.
Yeah.
And one of the main pillars of the Israeli existence is the American-British monetary and military support. Mm-hmm. So if there is, they have the nuclear weapons, they have this foreign support, and they have their military. It's all military, basically, right? Yeah. So if the American support is fading away or may fade away in the future, Israel cannot sustain. So the timing of the October 7 was interesting when the Americans were losing this war in this proxy war in Ukraine. So the timing, in my opinion, was calculated.
It's important to remember it wasn't just a proxy war in Ukraine. Everybody forgets there's a bunch of shit they were losing in Africa at the same time. Niger, Burkina Faso. they were losing a bunch, like they're losing their proxy wars and all their people were being plucked out. Then simultaneously the situation in Russia and Ukraine were happening. So it was happening. So it's like Israel, in my opinion, this, like you said, the timing was weird, but right now, including October 7th, it feels like they're acting out of desperation because you're like, shit,
Yes.
the only
Yes.
people that were keeping us able, like the only people that allowed us to do what we wanted to do are losing all their power. So if we don't do this shit now, we're never going to be able to do it.
Exactly. I think this timing was not a coincidence. It wasn't like planned 5 years ago and then decided to do it now, or they woke up in the morning and they said let's do it. No, I think they were calculating this after the Ukraine war, and they saw that the United States is heavily invested in Ukraine in terms of money and weapons and intelligence, and they thought this is the right time to strike Israel because the Americans then they have to diversify their energy between Ukraine and Israel. And this is what happened, basically. The Americans cannot sustain now two wars here and there. They have to lose one of them. And in any case, if they lose Ukraine, it's just going to impact positively on the Palestinians on the long term. If they abandon Israel, which is not going to happen, right? The Russians are going to occupy and destroy the regime in Ukraine. So in either way, in my opinion, this is
honestly, it's like the Russia's going to do that shit anyway. I don't know. I don't see an outcome other than Russia's going to win. It's just a matter of how many bombs until they get there, but it's going to happen.
It's just about the surrender terms now for Ukraine. Unfortunately, Ukraine is a destroyed nation now. And in 10 years from now, people are going to realize that the nationhood of Ukraine will disappear from the map. First of all, we have hundreds of thousands of men perished in Ukraine. And their women they will not find men to multiply in Ukraine. This is a serious issue.
They're going abroad.
Yes, many of them are already in Western Europe. Many of the men are in Western Europe. They escaped the war, and also the infrastructure of Ukraine. They cannot sustain without an economic openness to with Russia, without a family relationship with Russia. And what the Russians are going to do, they are going to seal the borders with the Black Sea, and they're going to convert Ukraine into landlocked country where the Ukrainians do not have access to the Black Sea, and they will lose another geopolitical value, right? It's very sad that Ukraine has turned into this, because this was all it could have been avoided only in February, March 2022. And this is all on the hands of Boris Johnson and Joe Biden. The problem with these people, they have two problems. One is the wishful thinking, and they wish to inflict pain into Russia. They thought that they can destroy the economy of Russia with the sanctions, etc. And this is the reason why Putin didn't do what he did in 2022, back then in 2014, because between 2014 to 2022, he was basically striking economic deals and strategic partnerships with different powers around the world. So when the sanction regime hits Russia, they are immune. He was thinking ahead, right?
Better than immune at this point, right? Like their economy is doing much better.
Yeah, I mean the Americans. So they have this wishful thinking, and second, they don't care about the people. What they're doing to the Ukrainians is, if you go to Ukraine and just ask ordinary people, you will definitely hear something different than these talking heads on TV who are speaking about the bravery of the Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian people have been smashed. Their livelihood is gone. Their brothers are dead. Their fathers are dead. What are you talking about, man? Those people are like, I feel very, very sorry for them, because they are being used as a pawn against Russia. Yeah. And now their president is not backing off, and is increasingly sending more men to the front line. 2 weeks of training, and you go to the meat grinder, and you die. You have no chance.
They lowered the conscription age too recently.
Yeah, they have no chance against a well-trained superpower like Russia. And everybody told them this. In the critical people told them this, but we're going to win this war. Russia will lose, and then the Leopards, and then the howitzers, and then this tank and this rocket will change. And every time there is a game changer weapon, people think this is a PlayStation. This is not a PlayStation. What scores decisive victories are the soldiers, are the
Yep.
artilleries, are the planners on the ground, not the air force only, and not the tanks. The tanks need drivers. When the tank is hit, needs to be repaired. The tank needs fuel. Everything is like it's a science. And when
It
the
really is. Yeah.
Ukrainian army is for decades are trained on Soviet style military tactics, Soviet style fighting and defending, and also the equipment. And now the NATO countries came and said, I'm going to give you my best challenger. It's like, this guy has never been on a challenger, right? It's
Right.
like he's been using the T-72, he has been using the T-90, and he doesn't know this weapon. He needs years. These weapons
Yeah.
are not candies. I know from Syria, if a pilot wants to fly an American, the Russian MiG or the Russian Sukhoi, they go for 5 to 7 years to Russia for training, for theory, for like they do comprehensive courses there. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in a week
And that's
or
why
two.
it's everywhere. Like you're in there for a while, and it's a very, I know in the U.S. it's very 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 strict requirements for you to even be able to take the course to maybe be a pilot, because just because you got into the course doesn't, and you can do years and you
Hmm?
still don't actually get the job because it's
Yeah.
that rigorous. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why in Syria, for example, when these so-called rebels used to gun down an airplane and a fighter jet, and they killed the pilot, this is it's worth hundred of one of these rebels, right? Because these idiots, they just have an AK-47 and they're just shooting people. But these people, they're highly educated. They went for many years and studied, and they came back. And yeah, so war is complicated, and people think that a tank or an air force or one of the missiles will change the equation. No, because the Russians, in this case, every single weapon that the Americans have, the Brits have, the Germans have, they have already reverse engineered them. These are declared weapons. It's not like secret weapons that they gave it to the Ukrainians. The Russians know how the challengers work, and they know where are the weaknesses, the weakness points. They know
Mm-hmm.
how these
The
cruise
limitations.
missiles can be fired, and see what they're doing. They're using few thousand euro or dollar drones with the GPS, and they choose and pick the exact weak spot on the tank to hit it with a few $1,000 drone, and the entire tank is
Now
is burning.
$500,000 tank is
It's
gone.
gone. And those are our taxpayer money. Remember, like I am paying my taxes, and my
Mm.
taxes are going to Ukraine and to finance the meat grinder. If this is a noble case and you know that you have to support the people, then if my taxpayer money is going for humanitarian aid to the Ukrainian people, I would like for the government to take double the taxes, right? I don't mind helping people, but they're not helping the people. They are killing the people, and
Mm.
this has to be stopped. This has to be spoken and discussed, and there should be a new security architecture in Eastern Europe. How is it? Why is it okay for the US to have strike missiles in Poland, in Germany, nuclear weapons, basically just directed at Moscow? And then the American, I remember there was this interview, an American journalist interviewed Putin. This was a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so. And he asked him, why are you, Mr. Putin, are very suspicious of the American missile system in Eastern Europe? I mean, those are directed at Iran, he said. And Putin started laughing his ass out, and he said, "Thank you so much for this laughter. Now I can go to bed with a smile on my face." It's like,
Right.
do you think I'm stupid? Like, why do you put your nuclear weapons in Poland and then tell me those are directed at Iran? I
When we
think,
had plenty of access to plenty of locations that we could, if we really wanted to aim them at Iran, we want to put them in Poland, of all
yeah,
places.
yeah. It
Right.
is
Yeah.
so. In my opinion, the aggressor is very clear cut here. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to understand these things, but there is a big blackout on information. People do not know all this information that we know. They don't know the promises of the Americans not to expand to 1 inch on the east of Berlin. And now
Mhm.
they are on the borders in Ukraine and building. Ukraine was already has already become a de facto NATO country after 2014.
Basically.
And for the Russians know once Ukraine joins NATO, the Americans playing chess against the Russians, and
Yeah.
if you
And
put
technically, they would be surrounded officially, right?
yeah,
Because they have the DMZ in North Korea. They have
exactly. And if
they
you put
have. Go
the,
ahead.
North Korea and after Russia, they will go after China.
Mhm.
This is the script, and complete dominance over the world, right? To also stop the rise of China and any power. And so, how the Americans see Europe? They see Europe has four bridges. The first bridge is France. The second bridge is Germany. The third bridge is Poland, and the fourth bridge is Ukraine. So the first three bridges are already in NATO, and the Americans have big influence. They have their weapons, they have their nuclears. Ukraine is the last bridge, and when you conquer Ukraine through NATO, you can project your power through these four bridges inside of Russia. So what you can do basically destabilize Russia from within, turn one component against another, steer these religious sectarian tensions among
The
the people.
the the same strategy they use it against the USSR with the intelligentsia and all that good
Mhm.
stuff.
Exactly. So the Russians thought that if they don't go into war now, on offensive in Ukraine, the next thing is going to happen. They have to fight the war inside Russia. So that's why they went to war in Ukraine, and to
Mm.
create this buffer zone now between them and NATO. And the worst case scenario that it is a war of attrition for many decades, and the best case scenario for them that they win this war and the Americans are forced to sign a new security architecture. This is going to take some time, but if you see it and foresee what's going to happen next, Americans are declining and the Russians are going up. It doesn't take a
Mhm.
genius to see that. And the Chinese are the same thing. So the Russians have to have a strategic patience now. And I think in a decade, too, the Americans will be forced to withdraw from some of the places in Eastern Europe because they will not be able to finance it. They cannot print just money forever.
Right. I mean, they ain't gonna be able to forever. I don't even know if I give it a decade. It might be less than that, depending on how the situation with Iran goes. Because
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that Russia, like, yeah, I know that they're busy with Ukraine, and I firmly believe that the reason that the United States continues to send aid, quote unquote, military aid to Ukraine is not because they actually believe Ukraine could win, but they need to keep Russia busy because if Iran decides to go into a direct conflict with Israel, and it looks like it's going to be boots on the ground, Russia's already there. Russia's in Syria. Ain't like they got to go that far. It's a hop, skip,
Yeah.
and a jump. And they just send some more people. And it's not like what's going to happen if a year and a half, 2 years from now, Russia decides to join with Iran? What, Ukraine's going to all of a sudden find 2 million men to take their land back?
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
it's not going to happen.
No,
So,
no, it's the end. It's the end. For Americans cannot go to war. It's done. I mean,
yeah.
in Ukraine, they have a few, let's say, boots on the ground with civil dresses, this and that. But the time of Americans going to war, like in Iraq, in Afghanistan, are gone. It's done.
Mhm. Yeah.
And look what they're doing with the Yemenis.
Yeah, getting their asses handed by Yemen, bro. What? By Yemeni people, and they were talking
yeah.
about it like, yeah, man, it's just Yemen. People were discounting them from the beginning. It's just Yemen. It's just Yemen. I'm like, all right, guys, y'all keep with that. Y'all said
Good
it's
luck.
just Afghanistan, right? It's just the Taliban. It's just,
Good
you know
luck.
what I'm saying? Like they keep saying that, and then every time that happens,
Good
they
luck
get
with
wiped.
that. Uh,
So,
they, uh, uh, they cannot win on the Yemenis. That's why they're just bombing them from the sky. And if this was in the past, 20 years ago, everybody would have shaken legs when the Americans sent their warships to the region, right? Now nobody cares.
nobody
Why?
cares.
Because the warships have turned from an opportunity for the Americans into an opportunity to the adversaries. All these warships and these aircraft carriers are just expensive shit to keep and sustain and repair, compared to if Iran flies or Yemen flies or Hezbollah, this size, can fly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kamikaze drones in the Mediterranean. If one of these warships are hit, what is going to happen to the warship, to the reputation of the American army? And
bro, I can tell you, I have family in the Navy. When I tell you, it takes these motherfuckers so long to fix a ship, Kevork. It takes them so long, like 2 to 3 years. Like basically, my friend was supposed to be deployable, but he couldn't because the ship that he was on just needed basic repair. Not like it was attacked. It just needed basic repairs. The man didn't leave because the ship was broken for 3 or 4 years. Like, and that's without being attacked. So you attack 1 or 2 or 3 of these ships, they don't got an Iron Dome to protect them, right? And they're just going to be sitting ducks, and they got to send them back, and they don't have enough ships at least in the U.S. Navy to keep sending them back out. Like, there's not really a victory that can be had, because while the U.S. has been relying on this like traditional, we keep flexing our military might, quote unquote, but we keep using these traditional methods to fight modern wars, while everyone else was actually, improving and evolving because they were forced to, unfortunately, because of the U.S. Kev, I don't want to hold you up for too long, man. Tell everybody where they can find you at.
I would just say one last thing. For example, just about these warships, it's very important. The drones have changed the equations. And what can these players do in the region? And I'm not saying that they have to do it. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just analyzing from what I see. They are capable of sending hundreds of kamikaze drones to one of these warships or the aircraft carriers. Are very, very, very expensive, right? And then they only have to fire one torpedo and one anti-ship cruise missile. And all of these players have. Hezbollah have gotten hundreds of these rockets and weapons from Syria. We Syrians buy it from the Russians, and the next thing you see, the Hezbollah people have already have in hand over it. Hezbollah, it's a party, political party, and the military militia in Lebanon, and they have anti-ship cruise missiles, and they have thousands and thousands of kamikaze drones, very sophisticated ones. And I think this is has become an opportunity for them to impose a deterrence in the region, because the future is not going to be peaceful in the region unless the Americans withdraw. As long as the Americans stay in West Asia, there is going to be wars and turbulences. Why? Because the American economy is based on war. There is no war, there is no money laundering operations, and there is no money washing, and there is no money printing, and these elites are not going to make money if there is no war. But the adversaries of the United States, China and Russia, they have a different economic model, and that is based on economic integration of these different countries. It's completely different. One is based on peace to make profits, and the other one is wars to make profits. And that is why Americans have to get out of the region. And when I say Americans, I mean the American influence and the dominance from the region. And only then there could be a sustainable peace in the region. And I think the people deserve that. So, man, thank you so much really for having me on this show. I really enjoyed it.
Now, that was very enlightening. I appreciate it. I'm sure my audience does as well. Where can they find you at?
So my YouTube channel is called Syriana Analysis. I post daily live streamings at 11 a.m. Eastern American time between Monday to Friday, basically. And also my X account is on my personal name, Kevork Almassian.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
All right. For everybody else, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of For the People podcast. Make sure y'all follow me at all the links in the description. You can support the show by donating through Patreon, which is also in the description, Cash App, all that good stuff. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.